me. I'm here. Yeah, perfect.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome at this press conference. We'll start with brief statements, starting with Prime Minister Rutte.
Good afternoon, and let me say it is a real honor to welcome Justin Trudeau today and speak with him in the run-up to the crucial summits in Rome next weekend and Glasgow on Monday and Tuesday, and of course then continuing after that. And we will both be taking part in those two summits. Canada and the Netherlands have an excellent and a strong relationship, which is historical, cultural, political and economic. At the end of the Second World War, Canadian soldiers played a major role in the liberation of the Netherlands and the rest of Western Europe from German occupation. Young Canadians risked their lives for our freedom, and many of them paid the ultimate price. It's difficult to find words that can fully honor their courage and their sacrifice. The Netherlands is eternally grateful to Canada, and I want to convey that gratitude once again on behalf of my country. After the war, large numbers of Dutch people emigrated to Canada to build a new life. Many of them and their children are now fully Canadian, though they remember their Dutch roots. This makes the bond between our countries even stronger. We understand each other. One of the ways this is expressed is in both our countries' open outlook and focus on multilateral cooperation in the world of international politics. Our two countries attach great importance to the international legal order, a strong transatlantic relationship, and international cooperation in pursuit of a more secure world. Relations are also excellent on the economic front. In 2019, before the coronavirus pandemic, Dutch exports to Canada totaled over 4 billion euros, while imports from Canada came to more than 2 billion euros. So we are key trading partners, and we have every intention of building on this. Of course, we have spoken at length about tackling climate change, one of the key issues for both the G20 summit in Rome and obviously for COP26 in Glasgow. The recent reports on the subject paint a worrying picture, and Justin Trudeau and I will do our utmost to achieve a meaningful outcome in Glasgow. Of course, one of our principal aims is the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, preferably as soon as possible. But adaptation is another key issue, as we need to make ourselves resilient to the effects of climate change we are already seeing. So it is crucial, it is important to share our knowledge about these subjects. And this is why I'm happy Justin Trudeau was able to visit the Global Centre on Adaptation in Rotterdam today. NATO is also focusing more attention on the climate issue. And that's the reason why we are working on a NATO Centre of Excellence on climate and security. Canada has offered to host this centre. In the Netherlands' view, Canada would be the perfect home for this platform, given its strong profile and commitment to this important issue. I trust the Centre of Excellence will be in good hands in Canada, and I'm confident it will further enhance NATO's understanding of and, at the same time, adaptation to the impact of climate change on security. On the bilateral relations, we agreed to hold government-to-government meetings on a regular basis. Probably in a sort of two-year cycle, we will travel with a team from the Netherlands of ministers to Canada, and then at the other spot in time, they will travel from Canada over here to The Hague to the Netherlands. And in the meantime, we'll make sure we follow up on all the agreements we have made in those meetings. And this is a next level of relations between Canada and the Netherlands, and I'm very happy that we decided this today, as we also decided to work very closely together in the next 2 days in Rome and then again also in Glasgow. In conclusion, again, Justin, I want to thank you for coming to the Netherlands. We will, as I said, continue to work closely together, both bilaterally but also in all these multilateral meetings where we collectively can have an impact, to create new economic opportunities, to safeguard our values, and to make sure that from this energy and climate transition we will also gain in economic strength, and therefore building a cleaner and more sustainable, and therefore also a safer world. Again, thank you for coming and looking forward to our talks and our dinner and of course working together in Rome and Glasgow. Please.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for your kind words and thank you for your invitation today. It has been a very, very warm welcome today for the Canadian delegation, and being here really gives a deepening sense of the effectiveness and the alignment within our partnership. Ce matin, j'ai eu la chance d'aller voir un cimetière où des Canadiens ont donné le sacrifice ultime pour protéger des valeurs que nous partageons en tant que pays. Pendant la Deuxième Guerre mondiale, on a créé des liens d'amitié et des connexions profondes qui durent jusqu'à aujourd'hui. Mais les plus grandes connexions que nous avons ne sont pas juste basées dans l'histoire, mais dans le présent. Our connections between Canada and the Netherlands, of course, are deeply impacted by our shared service and sacrifices during World War II, which we can never forget. But they are also very much based in shared values, in a shared outlook, in shared priorities, not just for ourselves and our people, but for the world. Both Canada and the Netherlands are trading nations, strong around the rule of law, open to ideas and perspectives and exchanges. And those principles and that optimism for the future gives us tremendous opportunities to work together. That's what Mark and I discussed today. À la COP26, la semaine prochaine, nous allons parler et travailler ensemble pour que tout le monde fasse sa part pour lutter contre les changements climatiques et créer une économie plus verte. À Rome, demain et dimanche, nous allons parler de comment on peut continuer de renforcer le commerce, la coopération multilatérale, un à côté de l'autre, pour pousser cette vision commune. Because that's what our citizens expect of us. It's indeed what the world has come to expect from places like Canada and the Netherlands. We wear our values on our sleeves, stand up for what we believe in, encourage, exhort others to live up to their own ideals of supporting people, fighting for what's right, attracting investment and driving innovation, creating good jobs for everyone, all while leading on climate action. These are the things we need to keep doing, and this is where countries like Canada and the Netherlands that get it can push for even more, even faster. We talked about progressive trade, and I know it's been 4 years now since 95% of the Canada-EU free trade agreement has been in place. And we've seen increases in exports of goods, of services, both ways in our countries. It's good when two progressive, like-minded countries who've known the importance of trade for centuries are able to demonstrate that we can continue to work in ways that benefit all of our citizens. Because we know trade creates growth. What our preoccupation now is to make sure that the benefits of that growth accrue to everyone, not just a few. That's what progressive, inclusive trade deals like CETA are all about. And I look forward to continuing great conversations like the one I had at the Parliament this morning in how we keep moving forward to make sure that the benefits and the protections that can flow from countries who are friends and allies working together even closer are real and felt for everyone. Finally, we spent a good amount of time as well discussing democracy, human rights, and the rule of law, whether it's cooperating as we have at the International Court of Justice, whether it's Canada's history in contributing to the International Criminal Court here in The Hague, whether it's the work we've always done, side by side, in many cases literally, in places like Afghanistan and other parts of the world, through NATO and others, standing up and being willing to sacrifice for what we believe in. The Netherlands and Canada have so many points in common. It just makes sense for us to be standing side by side as we push and nudge the rest of the world to do more on fighting climate change, to do more on creating prosperous, inclusive economies that work for everyone, to do more on standing against radicalization and fighting systemic discrimination, on creating open societies where everyone looks out for each other. As we learned during the COVID-19 pandemic, the societies that were there to support each other, countries where neighbors stood for neighbors, made those sacrifices to get through it, did better than those who didn't. These are things that we need to continue learning and bring forward as lessons. Alors, je te remercie, mon ami, cher Premier ministre, pour ton leadership et pour tout ce que tu es en train d'amener dans le monde, et je suis fier de pouvoir le faire à tes côtés. On a final note, I just want to address an issue back home for Canadians. I know the issue of the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal ruling on Indigenous children in care is facing a deadline today. Let me tell you that ministers are actively working on this, even this morning in Ottawa. There will be an announcement later, but there isn't one right now. But let me say, we are committed to compensating Indigenous people who were harmed as children in child and family services. And further, we are committed to working with partners to end this harmful system and to make sure that kids at risk get to stay in their communities, in their culture, and be cared for by their communities. That is the path forward on reconciliation, and that is what we are pledged to do. Merci.
First question for CBC, please.
Hello, Prime Ministers. I'd like to ask you about the climate conference and the situation we've seen going into the G20 and the summit in Scotland. Coming into this, the richer, more developed countries have failed to deliver the $100 billion they've promised to deal with climate mitigation. And some of the larger polluting countries are resisting measures such as the phasing out of coal or aren't delivering the more ambitious targets you'd hoped for. So how worried are you about COP being seen as a failure if you can't get some movement at the G20 in Rome or change some minds when you both get to Scotland?
First of all, I agree that the G20 will be important in the run-up to COP26. So in that sense, that they are organized back-to-back, I think is very positive and it's very helpful. So there will be a lot of work being done in Rome tomorrow and on Sunday. And at least the two of us will work very hard to do whatever we can to bring our colleagues along in the G20. One of the issues raised is the pledge of the 100 billion, and the Netherlands has in recent past has put forward proposals also nationally in our contribution to make sure that we get closer to the 100 billion, but there is still a gap. You're absolutely right. So we have to discuss that in Glasgow. And at the same time, what we now see is that the add up of all the plans will lead to a warming of 2.7 degrees. Instead of the 1.5 which we agreed in Paris in 2015. So there is still a gap and there's still a lot we need to do. I am still positive because there are two reasons. One is there is no way not to do this because then we collectively have such a big problem. And everybody understands that in terms of how to go forward collectively on this planet. And secondly, because there is such a big opportunity. The huge opportunity we see in this country for creating so many new jobs, new economic prosperity, at the same time building a clean country where people can live in a pleasant atmosphere and environment. Of course, in Europe as a whole, but also collectively in the world. We discussed, for example, the permafrost issue. Take Russia and the risk that we will see what could happen in terms of if that continues, if the temperatures continues to rise and permafrost, as you know, has a 30 times bigger impact than the CO2 emissions because of the methane coming out of it. So there are so many things to discuss. I'm really positive. Our teams are working tonight and tomorrow how we can also as Canada and the Netherlands work on this. We are doing our utmost, of course, within the EU. The EU is collectively negotiating in Glasgow. And the US is back. That's also very important. And so I'm fairly optimistic that we can still achieve a good outcome. But you're right. If we don't work hard, it could be in trouble.
I think Mark makes a number of good points that I'll build on. The fact that the G20 is immediately before COP26 allows some of the major countries around the world responsible for significant emissions to actually meet and work in advance of hopefully what will be a very successful COP. But similarly, this meeting between like-minded friends just before we go into the G20 and COP has allowed us to strategize about how we're going to continue to put pressure to make sure that the world is stepping up on these huge challenges. Like Mark, Canada has, like the Netherlands, Canada has stepped up. We've actually doubled our climate financing pledge. And we're working with like-minded allies, including Germany and others, to ensure that the world does hit its $100 billion pledge very rapidly, and indeed goes beyond that, because we know that if there is not the investments made in cleaner energy and in new technologies in the global south, we don't hit our targets. And that leadership and those clear voices coming from the global south are extremely important, and the world will be paying heed to all that. There is much more to do, but we are here to certainly not just do our parts, but do everything we can to make sure that others are doing theirs. Okay. Je veux souligner à quel point c'est important que des pays alignés comme les Pays-Bas et le Canada s'alignent pour travailler ensemble pour justement s'assurer que nos collègues du G20, nos collègues à COP, reconnaissent qu'il faut en faire plus, qu'il faut être encore plus ambitieux. Et ça fait partie des conversations qu'on a eues aujourd'hui pour avoir une approche coordonnée et stratégique au G20 et à COP26.
ANP.
Yes. Mr. Trudeau, the Dutch Parliament hasn't approved the CETA treaty yet, and there is a big opposition to the treaty. What will happen if the Dutch Parliament rejects the treaty? What do you think about that? And this morning you said if the Netherlands can't sign a treaty with a country like Canada, with whom else can it sign a treaty? Can you elaborate about that?
First of all, let's be very clear. We signed CETA with the European Union about 3 or 4 years ago now. And over the past years, we've seen opportunities for small businesses and communities and workers, both in the Netherlands and in Canada, increase in terms of export and trade opportunities between our two countries. We have already seen how free trade done right around responsible shared values and ideals on protecting workers, on fighting for a cleaner environment, has been effective to grow our economies, even through the difficulties of COVID-19. But I understand that every parliament and every country goes through its own ratification processes. And the reflection that I have is if you hear someone say, oh no, we're in favor of free trade, we just don't like this particular agreement, ask them to explain. If they're not okay with the free trade agreement with a progressive, allied, green-focused, labor-focused country like Canada, then with which country might they be in favor of free trade with? If you can't make a free trade deal with Canada, maybe you're not in favor of free trade at all.
Radio Canada.
Monsieur Trudeau, good afternoon, Prime Minister. How are you? I have a Canadian question in French. Monsieur Trudeau, vous avez répondu en anglais, mais je vous demanderai quand même de répondre en français et en anglais. Quel message vous croyez que ça envoie aux peuples autochtones que vous preniez jusqu'à minuit moins 5 avant d'annoncer votre décision sur le tribunal des droits de la personne?
Je pense que tout d'abord, les gens savent que nous travaillons jusqu'à la dernière minute sur cet enjeu-là. Ça fait des semaines qu'on regarde exactement la voie à suivre, parce qu'on sait tous que la réconciliation est extrêmement importante, mais pas toujours facile. Alors le travail qui est en train de se faire, même maintenant, ce matin, à Ottawa et à travers le pays, pour trouver la bonne voie pour avancer, continue. Et on va avoir une annonce à faire. Mais je veux que les gens sachent que nos priorités, c'est d'abord, oui, on va compenser ces personnes autochtones qui ont souffert dans les services de protection de la jeunesse dans les années antérieures. Et encore plus important, nous allons travailler avec les communautés autochtones, avec le leadership autochtone, pour transformer et pour mettre fin à ce système qui continue d'enlever des jeunes autochtones de leur communauté, de leur famille, de leur langue, de leur culture. Il leur cause des problèmes et des dommages pour le restant de leur vie. C'est pas ça la réconciliation. La réconciliation, c'est de continuer à travailler ensemble et ne pas faire des dommages aux enfants.
J'ai une question. Vous avez dit ce matin que l'important, c'était pas seulement de fixer des cibles, mais d'avoir des plans concrets pour pouvoir les atteindre. Alors, j'aimerais vous demander concrètement comment vous allez plafonner les émissions qui proviennent du secteur pétrolier et gazier.
C'est justement un des engagements concrets que nous avons pris pendant la campagne électorale, de mettre un plafond au niveau actuel aux émissions de gaz à effet de serre du secteur pétrolier et gazier au Canada, et on va les réduire dans les années à venir juste pour atteindre le net zéro. Et je dois souligner d'ailleurs que les grandes compagnies pétrolières au Canada se sont, pour la plupart aussi, se sont engagées à atteindre cette carboneutralité d'ici 2050. Donc, ils ont reconnu qu'ils doivent le faire. Nous allons s'assurer qu'ils le fassent. Et ça fait partie du travail que nous faisons maintenant en tant que nouveau gouvernement avec un nouveau cabinet.
And the final question for Volkskrant.
I have a question for Mr. Trudeau. Welcome to our country. As you know, that the Netherlands and also Canada recently have evacuated a lot of people from Afghanistan. And during that chaotic process, a lot of people ended up in the wrong country. Families got separated because each took a plane to a different country. And as a result, several of these Afghans are also now in the Netherlands who actually need to be reunited with family members in Canada. I was wondering, is this issue, was it addressed between you and Prime Minister Rutte? And if yes, have you agreed on some kind of timeline to solve the situation? And if no, would you be interested to receive information about many cases that I, as a journalist, been represented with?
First of all, I absolutely, Prime Minister Rutte and I spoke about Afghanistan, about our commitment as NATO allies over many years, 2 decades now, in fighting for better outcomes, particularly for women and girls in Afghanistan, and how difficult it was to watch the events unfold over the past weeks and months. Canada and the Netherlands have committed to getting people out of Afghanistan, to resettling them in our countries. But we know that with the Taliban in power, the challenges of getting people out are significant, which is why as an international community we continue to push on the Taliban to ensure that people who want to leave are able to do so. Yes, as you say, many people have been scattered around the region, indeed around the world, in looking for safe haven. Canada has committed to taking tens of thousands of Afghans to Canada, people who have either connections to Canada or who were recognized as human rights defenders or journalists or activists of various types. And part of the work we're doing right now is working with allies and friends and partners in the region to make sure that people who are destined to Canada get to come to Canada as quickly as possible. We want them to be able to set up their lives in the future, and I will continue to be working with Mark and other allies on making sure that Canada can welcome as many families as possible over the coming months and years.
Maybe I could add that yes, there was chaos during the evacuation, so sometimes you had evacuation flights with many people on board who were not necessarily destined for that one destination, but still you have to make sure that they get to the final end destination they want to go to. What also happens is that sometimes people worked for both Canada and the Netherlands or other countries. And there are various cases where there is now an invitation from both the Netherlands and Canada to go there. And at the moment, Canada, the Netherlands, other countries are trying to make sure that, yeah, as soon as possible, everybody ends up where he or she should end up. But it is sometimes a complex process. If you have information, we would love to have that.
And allow me actually to thank you specifically, Mark. During those evacuations, you were able to airlift out a number of Canadians and Canadian-connected people. So, as always, we're there to help each other, and I really appreciate it.
I think that was two ways, absolutely. Thanks.
There seems to be a brief follow-up question from CBC, if you'll
Okay,
let me.
yeah.
Of course.
Hi there. Just a follow-up question about the G20. And one of the issues that is going to be discussed in Rome is the whole idea of vaccine equity, in particular helping lower-income and developing countries get access to vaccines. Well, we've seen a lot of rich nations talking about already moving to booster shots and third shots for people. Should richer nations like Canada and European countries forego booster shots until the rest of the world is adequately vaccinated?
I would think that, no, I do not agree with that thesis. What I do agree with is that we have to make sure, through the COVAX programs and the other initiatives, that enough vaccines reach the parts of the world which have difficulty to get to access to vaccines. The Netherlands is completely committed to that. There has been a problem with the distribution. We are now working on that to make sure that the vaccines get as soon as possible to the countries they are destined for. Of course, a lot of vaccines have already been sent to countries outside the European Union, in Africa, and the Netherlands bilaterally also with Suriname and Indonesia. I think it should be, in that sense, we should organize that. But I do not agree that we should forgo on boosters before this has all been settled. I think that that is not the right approach.
Canada will, as always, follow the science. I can remind everyone who's Canadian who's watching, we have enough vaccines in the country for all Canadians to get vaccinated, which is why we're pleased to be able to continually donate through COVAX and other ways vaccine doses. We will continue to step up in our generosity. We were among the first countries to fulfill our responsibilities around COVAX and ACT Accelerator. We will continue to work to ensure we're increasing the access of vaccines around the world, and it's not always just enough to redirect vaccines that we've purchased or paid for to go to countries around the world. We need to be sending money as well to invest in the logistical chains and hubs to actually get those vaccinations into arms. We will continue to do that. Canada and friends like the Netherlands will continue to make sure that this pandemic ends everywhere with everything we can do.
Thank you all. That concludes this press
sorry,
conference.
I just have to say that same in French. Yeah. Excusez-moi, Madeleine. Certainement, c'est extrêmement important de rappeler aux gens qu'au Canada, par exemple, nous avons assez de vaccins pour tout le monde. Alors, s'il vous plaît, si vous n'êtes pas fait vacciner encore, allez vous faire vacciner. Mais c'est aussi pourquoi on peut commencer à en offrir de plus en plus en dons aux autres pays. Nous allons continuer d'augmenter les dons que nous sommes en train de faire et de livrer, mais souligner aussi que ce n'est pas juste de donner des vaccins, c'est souvent donner de l'argent qui va permettre aux travaux nécessaires pour amener ces vaccins dans les bras des citoyens partout dans le monde. Merci tout le monde.
Thank you all very much.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you.